A global showdown is unfolding. Burkina Faso's President Ibrahim Traoré just issued a 72-hour ultimatum to Israel's Benjamin Netanyahu: apologize or face total diplomatic shutdown. This is history in the making, and you don't want to miss it. Hit that like button, subscribe, and share this video. Drop a comment below. Where are you watching from? Let's dive in. On July 30th, 2025, Burkina Faso's President Ibrahim Traoré delivered a seismic address that reverberated across global diplomatic circles. In a live national broadcast from the capital, Ouagadougou, Traoré issued an unprecedented ultimatum to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The demand was stark: issue a public apology within 72 hours, or face the permanent termination of all Israeli interests in Burkina Faso. This bold move, articulated with unwavering resolve, marks a pivotal moment in West African geopolitics and challenges the status quo of international relations. Traoré's warning was not merely a rhetorical flourish. It was a calculated declaration backed by a ticking clock. The ultimatum, shrouded in ambiguity regarding the specific grievance, has sparked intense speculation and debate. What prompted this audacious stand? Why has Israel remained silent? And what could the fallout mean for bilateral relations and the broader African geopolitical landscape? This article delves into the context, implications, and potential consequences of Traoré's 72-hour deadline, exploring the motivations behind Burkina Faso's stance and the global response to this unfolding diplomatic crisis. The address, a line in the sand announcement, came during a televised address that captivated audiences, both within Burkina Faso and beyond. Standing at a podium adorned with the national flag, President Traoré spoke with a clarity and authority that left no room for misinterpretation. His message was direct: Israel had crossed a line, and Burkina Faso would no longer tolerate what he described as disrespect. While Traoré refrained from disclosing the precise incident that triggered this ultimatum, his tone conveyed a deep sense of grievance, rooted in national pride and sovereignty. Burkina Faso has endured silence, and we have endured interference, Traoré declared, his voice steady yet forceful. But disrespect will not be tolerated. This is our final warning. Israel has 72 hours to apologize, or we will sever all ties completely and permanently. The statement was met with resounding applause from the gathered crowd, a reflection of Traoré's strong domestic support and the growing nationalist sentiment in Burkina Faso. The 72-hour deadline was not an arbitrary figure. It was a deliberate choice, signaling urgency and finality. Sources close to the Burkinabe government suggest that the measures under consideration are severe, potentially including the closure of diplomatic missions, suspension of trade agreements, and a complete ban on Israeli operations within the country. Such actions would represent a significant escalation, unprecedented in recent West African diplomatic history. Context: Burkina Faso's rising assertiveness. To understand the significance of Traoré's ultimatum, one must consider the broader context of Burkina Faso's political and diplomatic evolution. Since assuming power, President Traoré has positioned himself as a staunch advocate for national sovereignty and regional autonomy. His leadership has been marked by bold reforms, including efforts to strengthen Burkina Faso's military capabilities, combat internal security threats, and assert greater control over the nation's resources and foreign relations. Traoré's government has also sought to redefine Burkina Faso's role on the global stage. Historically, West African nations have maintained relatively low-profile diplomatic relations with Israel, often centered on trade, security cooperation, and agricultural technology. However, Traoré's administration has signaled a shift toward a more assertive foreign policy, one that prioritizes African unity and challenges perceived overreach by external powers. The ultimatum to Israel is, in many ways, a continuation of this trajectory. Analysts describe it as Traoré's most audacious move to date, reflecting his willingness to confront global powers head-on. This is not just about Israel, said Dr. Amina Coulibaly, a political scientist at the University of Ouagadougou. It's a statement to the world that Burkina Faso will no longer be a passive player in international affairs. Traoré is drawing a line in the sand, not just for Israel, but for any nation that underestimates Burkina Faso's resolve. The grievance, unspecified but significant lack of specificity, regarding the incident that prompted Traoré's ultimatum has fueled widespread speculation. Was it a diplomatic slight, a breach of protocol, or perhaps a more substantive issue, such as interference in Burkina Faso's internal affairs or a violation of bilateral agreements? Traoré's decision to withhold details has only heightened the intrigue, leaving analysts and observers scrambling to piece together the puzzle. Some speculate that the grievance may be linked to recent tensions in the Sahel region, where Burkina Faso has been grappling with security challenges and seeking international support. Israel, known for its expertise in counterterrorism and intelligence, has previously engaged with African nations on security matters. However, any perceived overstep or lack of transparency in such engagements could have sparked Traoré's ire. Others suggest that the issue may be symbolic, tied to broader African sentiments about global power dynamics. Traoré's reference to disrespect resonates with a growing narrative among African leaders who are increasingly vocal about rejecting paternalism and asserting their agency. This is about dignity, said Kwame Osei, a Ghanaian diplomatic analyst. Traoré is signaling that Burkina Faso will not tolerate being treated as a junior partner in international relations. Israel's silence, a strategic choice. As of July 31, 2025, the Israeli government has offered no official response to Traoré's ultimatum. This silence is notable, given the gravity of the situation and the potential consequences for Israeli interests in Burkina Faso. Israel maintains a modest but significant presence in the country, including diplomatic representation and partnerships in agriculture and technology. The prospect of losing these ties, even if limited in scope, carries implications for Israel's broader engagement with West Africa. Analysts are divided on the reasons for Israel's reticence. Some argue that it reflects a strategic decision to avoid escalating the situation. Netanyahu is likely weighing his options, said Dr. Yoel Cohen, a Middle East expert at Tel Aviv University. A public response could inflame tensions, especially if the specifics of the grievance are unclear. Silence may be a way to buy time and assess the situation. Others, however, see Israel's lack of response as a potential miscalculation. By not addressing the ultimatum, Israel risks appearing dismissive, said Osei. In the context of African diplomacy, where respect and acknowledgement are paramount, silence could be interpreted as further disrespect, strengthening Traoré's resolve to follow through on his threats. Regional and global reactions. While global news outlets have been slow to cover the story, regional media in Africa has amplified Traoré's address, with the speech gaining significant traction on social media platforms. Hashtags such as #Traoré72hours and #Burkina Israel are trending across African networks, reflecting widespread public interest and debate. Social media reactions range from expressions of pride in Traoré's boldness to calls for clarity on the nature of the dispute. African leaders have yet to issue formal statements, but diplomatic sources indicate that the ultimatum is being closely watched across the continent. For many, it represents a test case for how African nations can assert their sovereignty in the face of global powers. Traoré's move is being seen as a bellwether, said Koulibaly. If he follows through, it could inspire other African leaders to take similarly bold stands. Internationally, the response has been more muted, with major news outlets still gathering information. However, the ticking clock, now less than 48 hours from its deadline as of this writing, has begun to draw attention. The potential for a complete diplomatic rupture between Burkina Faso and Israel could have ripple effects, particularly in the context of Africa's evolving relationships with Middle Eastern powers. Potential consequences: a diplomatic rupture. If Traoré follows through on his ultimatum, the consequences could be far-reaching. The closure of diplomatic missions would sever formal channels of communication, making reconciliation more difficult. Suspension of trade agreements could disrupt economic ties, particularly in sectors like agriculture, where Israel has provided expertise and technology to Burkina Faso. A ban on Israeli operations could also impact private sector partnerships, potentially affecting Israeli businesses operating in the region, beyond bilateral relations. The ultimatum has broader implications for African geopolitics. Burkina Faso's stance could embolden other nations to take similar measures, reshaping the continent's approach to international partnerships. It also raises questions about the role of regional organizations, such as the African Union, in mediating such disputes. For Israel, the loss of ties with Burkina Faso, while not catastrophic, would be a setback in its efforts to expand its influence. In Africa, Israel has invested significantly in building relationships across the continent, particularly in areas like security and technology. A public break with Burkina Faso could complicate these efforts, signaling to other nations that cooperation with Israel